Hello, welcome to Opera Insight 2025. I'm your presenter, Dr. Don Feinberg, and this is episode 2, The Marriage of Figaro, Mozart's fast-paced comedy. But don't be fooled by the frolic. It offers us profound lessons about love. We will introduce a driving force for love, the love triangle. Then we will look at the opera with this social dynamic in mind. And finally, we're going to take a glimpse of psychologically serious insights about love that are all included in this glorious comedy. Let's jump in. Simply put, the love triangle is when two people compete for the love of a third. And of course, the two competitors have feelings of jealousy, even operatic vendetta. Love triangle drives momentum in this hectic plot, and it leads to the inevitable happily ever after that every comedy deserves. The plot overlays the revolutionary implications of the story when a servant gets the better of his master. The times, as Bob Dylan famously sang, they are a-changin'. The director, Laurent Pelly, set designer Chantal Thomas present an opera that literally and symbolically is revolutionary. Their production revolves around the clock and the 24-hour time frame in which the entire action of the opera takes place. When you enter the theater, you see giant gears of a clock strewn around on the sides of the stage, and that in and of itself turns like the workings of a clock. Immediately, we recognize this set is symbolic. The walls are paper-like, the plants are drawn on them, the floor is black and white, not trompe-l'oeil to pretend like they're tiles, it's sort of sketched on the floor, like the pages of a storybook. It is a timeless tale of the attempted abuse of power thwarted by the collective action of those who would be subjugated. Let's not forget, although part fairy tale and part social commentary, more than anything else, this opera is a great evening of entertainment and a timeless primer about love. To reflect this timeless quality, the opera is set in the early 20th century. Its costumes are more representative of Downton Abbey than 150 years earlier. But it works because this is not a story of the there and then. It's a tale for all time, and that time is the key. It's interesting to note that this opera almost did not get made, snuffed out by censors. Picture this. The year is 1785. Revolution is brewing in France. The royalty of the continent are none too pleased at these developments. A few years before 1778, a play written by Pierre Beaumarchais becomes very popular. One of its main characters, Count Almaviva, appeared previously in The Barber of Seville. There, he was a devoted romantic, and with the help of Figaro, aka the barber, aka the town fixer, Count Almaviva won the heart of fair Rosina. But here, in the new play, The Marriage of Figaro, Beaumarchais depicted him as a wealthy lecher without scruples, quite the villain of the piece and symbolic of all that was distasteful about the aristocracy. The result? The Beaumarchais play was banned in Vienna by the emperor. Yet, in the story, Mozart and his librettist, Lorenzo da Ponte, found comedic potential in a plot line that could accommodate the bold genius of Mozart's music. So, what to do? Da Ponte went to work to revise the opera's libretto, to eliminate the diatribes against the aristocracy and replace them with barbs directed against the usual suspects, women. Here's how Figaro reacts when he erroneously believes that his Susanna is having a secret rendezvous with Count Almaviva. He sings, "It's always madness to trust a woman. Open your eyes for a moment, you rash and foolish men. Look at these women. Look at what they are. You call them goddesses, and your befuddled senses pay them tribute with your weakened minds. They are witches who work spells to make you miserable, sirens to sing to you, to make you drown, screech owls that lure you to pluck out your feathers, comets that flash to take away your light. They are thorny roses, cunning vixens, hugging bears, spiteful doves, masters of deceit, friends of trouble who pretend, lie, and feel no love and feel no pity. Apparently, the Viennese censors had no trouble with all that. And together with Mozart's music, they softened the Count's character from villainous lecher to almost sympathetic sex addict. This mirrors another character, the youthful Cherubino, with his love for all women. So much so that during the opera's denouement, when Count Almaviva discovers that the woman with whom he's had his secret assignation is in fact his wife, the Countess, his repentance seems sufficiently credible. With these changes, the opera passed the censors' test. It's okay to mildly mock the aristocracy so long as it's all in good fun and nothing to lose your head over, especially when being caught out as a womanizer results in nothing more than a little embarrassment and absolute forgiveness from your beautiful wife. Nonetheless, the opera still has valuable psychological lessons to teach us about what drives the engine of love, the love triangle. So let's take a look. As the opera opens, Figaro, Count Almaviva's head servant, is set that day to wed his beloved Susanna. She is the Countess's maid, and in fact, as a wedding present, the Count has moved his faithful servant to a large room next to the master's suite. The naive Figaro learns from his perceptive wife that this gift is not a gift at all, but rather as a means to facilitate the Count's lecherous intentions towards Susanna. This certainly puts a wrinkle into their employment situation, but not a major block to their marital union. And thus, we set the first of many love triangles. The Count and Figaro both have designs on Susanna. Figaro is loving and honorable, and the Count, well, let's just say less so. Figaro may have been a bit naive about the Count and his intentions, but he's on to him now, and he plots his revenge. The triangle is complete. But revenge will have to wait. A new obstacle to the marriage appears. An older ex-housekeeper, Marcellina, arrives, accompanied by an angry Dr. Bartolo. He is angry and seeking his own vendetta against Figaro. The reason? Dr. Bartolo intended to marry Rosina, but through the clever strategy of Figaro, Rosina married the Count instead. Now, Bartolo arrives for his payback to help Marcellina ruin Figaro's marital happiness. How? By helping her collect an IOU from Figaro that states he must marry her if he does not pay back that loan this very day. Needless to say, it is a comedy, and he doesn't have to do either. Now, if you've seen the opera before, you know the reason why. And if you haven't, just enjoy Act 3's comic denouement, one of the greatest in all of opera. In the meantime, there is a feigned politeness between Marcellina and Susanna, who are purported rivals. Their response to each other, competing for Figaro, fits perfectly in yet another love triangle that drives this zany plot. Meanwhile, the Count's young page, Cherubino, admits to Susanna he loves all women, but especially the Countess. Here's where the plot gets really complex, and this is nothing compared to the end of the opera. With Cherubino in Susanna's boudoir, the Count arrives. Cherubino hides. The boy overhears the Count trying to seduce Susanna, telling her to meet him that very night. Then Don Basilio The music teacher enters, and the Count hides. Much hijinks ensues. Basilio tells Susanna that the Count is a much better catch than Cherubino. Huh? What? And besides, the kid has a crush on the Countess. Double. Huh? What? The outraged Count jumps up and becomes even more outraged when he discovers Cherubino hiding in the room. And just when you think it can't get crazier, Figaro arrives with a chorus to sing the Count's praises and to trap the Count into blessing the marriage of Figaro and Susanna that very day. Now, to get rid of Cherubino, the Count orders him to immediately join the army. But don't worry, Cherubino is rescued by the woman who loves him, Barberina. Who is Barberina, you ask? Well, she's the daughter of the gardener. But more importantly for this resolution, she fits into the story in another way. The Count tried to seduce her, and in the process, he promised her anything she wanted. So she turns in her marker, so to speak, by requesting that he grant permission for Cherubino and her to be married. Note the triangle, the Count and Cherubino competing for Barberina. The Count tries to get rid of the competition, but the skillful Barberina has turned the tables, and the sex-addicted Count has to look elsewhere. In Act 2, yet another love triangle forms and dissolves. The Countess laments the loss of her husband's love. She tells Susanna that she knows that the Count prefers her and lusts after her. Susanna dismisses her concern. She tells her, "He only wants me to bed me, but he truly loves you." How to prove it? Well, Figaro and Susanna convince the Countess to engage in a scheme of disguised identities, to catch the Count out and make him repent. To add to the chaos, confusion, and fun, a part of the scheme involves dressing the youth Cherubino as Susanna to meet the Count. Now, here's the thing. Cherubino is a woman mezzo-soprano playing the role of a young man. In opera, this is designated as a pants role. And as a man, they plan to disguise him, i.e. her, as a woman, which, of course, she actually is. Well, in any case, Cherubino barely escapes when the Count arrives. Note that the comedy here is infused with an urgency. The audience back then actually knew that if the Count caught him, he would be within his rights and angry inclinations to kill Cherubino on the spot. This point that there's an actual lethal threat afoot is made very clear in the original Beaumarchais play. Now, the director, Laurent Pelly, said that he was inspired by the drama beneath the comedy, like in the classic Jean Renoir film, The Rules of the Game. He too understands the tension in comedy comes because of the danger that lurks underneath the scene. And this production has great acting as well as singing, none more evident than in the timing and impact of this part of the narrative. Okay, so Cherubino escapes. This foils the disguise plan for the time being, and further scheming ensues. The Countess and Susanna switch clothes. So, when the Count has a secret assignation with the supposed Susanna, it will actually be his wife. Figaro, not knowing the plan, overhears, and he believes the real Susanna wants to secretly meet with the Count. He rants it's madness to trust a woman diatribe that we discussed earlier. But Figaro figures it out and plays along. The upshot of this is when he declares his passion for the Countess. He knows it's Susanna in disguise, and the Count is furious when he catches them out. But then the real Countess emerges, and his rage is extinguished when she steps forward and reveals her true identity. The Count asks for forgiveness for his philandering, which his wife ultimately grants, and there are wedding vows in the offing that close the loop, restore the harmony, and conclude this comedic opera. With all of that said, the opera illustrates a great deal about the psychology of love. It provides each of us with a platform for our own memories and experiences of love, good and bad, from our fondest daydreams to our most unsettling nightmares. Voltaire said, "Love is a canvas furnished by nature and embroidered by the imagination." Of course, he said it in French. Our imaginings individually not only define love, but help us to sort through its ambiguities. Even psychologists have a terrible time defining love because it means so many different things. Ambiguity permeates love. For example, love can be a state of being, like being in love. Often this denotes passion. Clearly, Figaro is in love with Susanna as he begins to measure his new room to see if their marriage bed will fit in on his wedding night. The bed is clearly a reference to his sexual expectations. After all, he doesn't expect they'll be playing whist. Cherubino appears to be in love with all women, especially the Countess, with an awe that suggests his passion does not have that physical component. A psychologist, Dorothy Tenoff, invented a word for this, limerence. The word is so obscure that not many psychologists even know it. But if you look it up in the dictionary, you might just find a picture of Cherubino. Another ambiguity is introduced with love because it's also a nuanced active verb. This is to be distinguished from the state of being in love. I wanted to say, in my many years of providing couples therapy, you know it's never a good sign when a sympathetic sounding person tells their partner, "I love you, but I'm not in love with you." So, while having a relationship that is desexualized may be problematic, it may also offer reassurance of the deepest form of friendship. Figaro, in Susanna's genuine care for Cherubino, is this kind of love. Still another ambiguous expression of love comes with its use as an entity, as in, "I have love in my heart," or "love grows inside me." In this way, the relationship determines the meaning of the entity. For example, if Marcellina had a child, she would instantly embrace it with motherly love. In addition, love changes in different stages of the life cycle. The passion that produced the love child in youth may have very different kind of love later in life. The poet Jean Jardy once offered, "Love is a word used to label the sexual excitement of the young and the mutual dependence of the old." Framed in a kinder way by the psychologist Elaine Hatfield, love evolves from passionate to compassionate. Certainly, we recognize this passion in Countess Almaviva. The despair as she enters in Act 2, feeling her love and unrequited, causing her intense anxiety and sadness, as well as fulfillment at the opera's end as she connects with the Count. But before we conclude this dive into operatic love, perhaps we can think about what might be a bit revolutionary about the way it's portrayed. It's the bond between the true heroes of the opera, Susanna and the Countess. In this way, Susanna depicts the power of the love triangle. In this opera, even though the Countess begins with the structure when she tells Susanna that the Count prefers her, that is to say, there is a competition for the Count, and I have lost him to you. Susanna says, sure, he wants sex from me, but I won't give in. And besides, he loves you. Their bond grows even stronger, so that the Countess agrees with Susanna and Figaro's scheme to undo the Count's philandering and to show that it is truly his wife to whom he is attracted. The romantic duet the Countess and Susanna sing yet again remind us that the genius of Mozart's music. It tells the story of the opera with a revolutionary perspective on the strength and competence of women. So, what part of this topsy-turvy love story compressed into a span of 24 hours do you relate to? What about it speaks to you in your own life and experience of love? Was your courtship sedate and orderly, like an arranged marriage, or a whirlwind romance with a stranger with whom you made eye contact across the proverbial crowded room? Does it evoke the triumphs or the disappointments of love, the petty jealousies or the deepening connections? What part of our experience of love do we look back on and now laugh about, or torment ourselves like we did in adolescence? And which part of our heartbreaks will still leave us with the residue of heartaches? So, in conclusion, when we look at the Marriage of Figaro through the lens of what it teaches us about love, we see a process driven by the love triangle. We see a process that reflects the many different aspects of love. Indeed, this opera can open our hearts to our very own personal experience of love. Next time, in episode 3, we find a darker side of lust and love in Verdi's tragedy Rigoletto. See you then.